And I think HR should embrace that. I think there was a movement a while ago where we were talking very much around automation, and a lot of HR professionals were not embracing automation for the fear that it was going to completely replace them in their roles. But I think there is an opportunity here to move away from, business as usual type of processes that has to happen, or incidents that's repeatable. I had an example in an organization where every single month somebody asked the question, so how many days do you get in the maternity leave policy? Now, we published the policy, we communicated the policy, but people don't take that information in until it's relevant to them. And I'm wondering through some of these things whether we can't free up some time and also get additional insight and knowledge into our solutions.
Hello everyone and welcome to HR Hot Topics, which is the show in which we talk about some of the stories that we've seen in the news in the past month and discuss how they impact the world of work. My name is Erik van Vulpen and with me is Dieter Veldsman. But before we start, like this video, and if you haven't already, subscribe to our YouTube channel. And I would say, let's dive right in. Our main story for today is titled Microsoft reportedly plans to invest $10 billion in creator of busy AI tool ChatGPT. Dieter, you and I have both been using it quite actively, I think, in the last couple of weeks, has made a splash. And I think it hasn't really made a splash in HR yet, but there's a lot of potential implications for HR. Dieter, my first question to you, what implications do you see? What applications do you see for ChatGPT in HR?
I think, Eric, definitely the last couple of weeks have seen all sorts of experimentation. And even though the technology is still in its infant stages, I think we can already acknowledge that there's so much opportunity in HR, especially around some of the more service-driven domains and the self-service driven domains of HR. The thing I'm most excited about is giving a lot more people access to good, responsible HR advice, not necessarily having to be based in one location.
Yeah, what I personally very much like about it is the ideation capacity that it have. I tell it, give me 10 ideas about X, and it comes with 10 ideas about X. And then I can follow up and ask, get more specific ideation, and it gives me a lot of great input. I even asked it to work on a talent acquisition certificate program outline, and it drafted a full outline with 2 topics that I hadn't thought about. So I also think that as long as we box it in and ask the right question to the chatbot, it can be very helpful in all kinds of employment issues as well, all the way until, manager assistance, where a manager says, I have a performance conversation, I'm struggling with these employees, what are 5 or 10 questions that I can ask this person to get them in the right direction? And ChatGPT will give you a good answer. I think that is very exciting.
I think so. I think you have to see what it provides to you in context, right? And I think there has to be this element around knowing what we deal with. Something that I sometimes worry about in a lot of HR organizations when we implement things like chatbots, etc., is we try to humanize it to such an extent that people don't know whether they're dealing with a machine or not. And I think it's quite important in this type of technology, as it becomes a lot more advanced, that we're pretty clear that it's being used in collaboration and in augmentation of human services that's also being provided. I love the fact that it can provide you very quick, solid answers. I mean, I would dream about a day where nobody has to phone HR to find out what stands in the policy, and that's something that you can automatically do. On the other side, though, I think there is some contextual things just to be careful about in this particular movement.
I think you're spot on, and that context is very important. I'm not going to ask the chatbot to write an employee handbook. It will probably write an employee handbook, but that is not the employee handbook for your organization. So I agree that context is everything, but even in that ideation on how to write that handbook, the editing of that handbook, and even finding the spelling errors in that handbook or unclear passages, ChatGPT can give you input there. And I think that is amazing.
I agree. I think there's also a good application there that we can really think about in terms of, how does it complement things like training materials that we're writing? How does it complement other things that we're trying to do when we're rolling out a new practice into business and doing train the trainers and writing guides, etc.? I think it is important that we understand what it can and what it cannot do, because I think that's the big thing that we need to ask that particular question and not immediately just jump in and I almost want to say irresponsibly try for it to be everything to everyone, because I think there's still a couple of things to work out, especially around things like bias. I think there's still some limitations there that we do need to think about.
I agree, and I'll be more critical in my next answer, but I just want to continue fanboying for 30 more seconds, because Sam Altman, the CEO of the company behind ChatGPT, very explicitly said, this is still a proof of work. This is a concept. This is not the finalized version. There's not a commercial version available yet, so it is still very much in its infancy. And there's interesting examples of indeed, if we ask it to, for example, I have a comment comment here, write a Python function to check if someone would be a good scientist. And then it comes with, a white male would be a better scientist than a black female, for example. So there is that built-in bias that the company is trying to get out, but it is an important bias that we should pay attention to.
Definitely agree. And there's also, I think, a current limitation around, some inappropriate responses that goes beyond just bias that I think can be very damaging in the organization as well. Where I do believe that it is important to think about these things is, HR has been struggling with releasing ourselves out of a lot of the transactional work, and we've been thinking that technology is the answer. I think for a very long time, this is the first real opportunity that we can say and see that there's an avenue for, more contextually relevant work happening in HR through certain technologies. And I think that's exciting.
I agree. And I also wonder what the potential implication of this is for HR shared services. If a machine is able to get this kind of generic knowledge and is able to train on all the language and all the conversations you've had, in the organization and within the organizational context, isn't there a place for a chatbot that has a very relevant answers to most of your, requests and queries, and then maybe for one of the more in-depth questions, you go to the actual person who is end responsible. But I think most of your self-service can be covered by ChatGPT.
And I think HR should embrace that. I think there was a movement a while ago where we were talking very much around automation, and a lot of HR professionals were not embracing automation for the fear that it was going to completely replace them in their roles. I think this is a real opportunity for us to complement and augment those particular roles. And, I think it is a bit of a cliche statement to make to say, get people to focus on the meaningful work stuff. But I think there is an opportunity here to move away from, business as usual type of processes that has to happen or incidents that's repeatable. I had an example in an organization where every single month somebody asked the question, so how many days do you get in the maternity leave policy? Now, we published the policy, we communicated the policy, but people don't take that information in until it's relevant to them. And I'm wondering through some of these things whether we can't free up some time and also get additional insight and knowledge into our solutions.
Yeah, I agree. And what I also find an interesting idea is, to what degree do we need to pretend the chat machine, to be human? Or can we just acknowledge, you are now talking to a robot. The robot will have 90% of your answers and is way faster than any human. But, if this answer is unsatisfactory or you feel like, something is wrong with it, don't hesitate to contact the human person here. And I think if we frame it that clearly and you're not thinking you're talking to a person, but, two answers in, you discover you're talking to a robot. I think if we start to get that clear, it may actually be a very good alternative and give the answer to, how many days the maternity policy is in your organization.
I think there's, for me again, it's that point around saying that it augments. Because I think we shouldn't think about this as a replacement. We should think about it as complementary to or instead of. And for me, that's going to be important because I've got no problem as a consumer or as an employee in the organization having to ask a chatbot certain questions.
So will this be the emergence of robotic HR?
Oh, that's a very strong statement, Erik. I think robotic HR is still a while away. I do think that it's a very big step towards HR redesigning itself and redesigning its value proposition around how it spends resources, what type of skills it brings into the environment. And because I do believe it also brings a lot of additional opportunities for HR to build different types of tech teams that can guide these things, etc. So I think it is like a watershed moment for HR. I don't think it's completely, yet the future, but maybe it's a good step in the right direction.
Anyway, if there's, to the HR professionals who are listening and who haven't tried it out yet, I would really say, give it a go, ask it a couple of questions, ask it a few relevant questions to your job as well, and just see if some of those answers are useful. For me, what I'm particularly excited about in an HR context are, for example, writing simulations for a training day, writing case studies, identifying learning objectives for L&D professionals, or checking writing, as I already said. Things like, suggest me an improvement. This is our employee handbook. What am I missing? And ChatGPT will come with actionable solutions. So those are some of the ideas and I think applications that in HR add a lot of value.
I also think in smaller HR organizations where they don't have the full range of specialists that specialize in all these different areas, I think it is a very good replacement to say, tell me some of the basics around how you implement performance management. Tell me, how does workforce planning work? I think there is some real application there that you can utilize to almost scale your HR team without having to grow your headcount.
I think the applications are broader than most of us imagine, and I would really encourage people to try it out for themselves.
Erik, maybe an interesting question would be to ask our community, what is the question that you would ask ChatGPT? And we had a little bit of an experiment here in studio, and we asked what would be the next 3 HR hot topics. And it came back with employee engagement, which I think is very relevant. Came back with diversity, equity, and inclusion, which we all know is a really hot topic at the moment in the world of work. And lastly, automated performance management, which I think is something that we have already explored earlier in this particular episode. So it seems like it works.
So you see, Dieter, ChatGPT is already working for us. So I think we can wrap it up.
Eric, seeing that this is our first episode of the new year, I have to ask this question. What's your New Year's resolutions for HR?
For me and for us here at AIHR, it is to provide continuous additional value to our members. I think with the courses, we're already doing that. We have a fantastic pipeline of new courses coming up that I'm very, very excited about. We're implementing the resource library, continuously expanding it, working on coaching, working on so many additional services, and the big update on the tech platform that the community platform that people have already seen, and there's much more to come. So those are part of my New Year's resolutions and things that I'm very excited about. But Dieter, I'm also very curious for you personally when it comes to HR. What are your resolutions?
I think, Eric, at the end of last year in our trends report, we spoke about, grasping this window of opportunity. And I really think from a New Year's resolution point of view, personally, I would love to say that, at the end of 2023, maybe I contributed a little bit in moving that conversation forward around how HR is going to remain relevant. So I think looking forward to that and seeing how that plays out in the next year.
I think that's a great resolution, Dieter. And with that, I think we come to the end of the episode where we really are wondering, what is the role of HR going forward? With automation happening, with a tool like ChatGPT taking over some of the more menial or potentially administrative labor, what is then the role of HR and where will HR evolve to? And I think that is a very exciting space to be in this new year as well. With that, I would love to wrap up. Thank you very, very much for watching. If you haven't yet, like this video, and also if you haven't yet, subscribe to this channel. And with that, I would like to wish you an absolutely brilliant day. Bye-bye.